Before we dive into today's episode, I have something for you. Head to nancypanuccio.com/guide to download my free answer guide for first-time writers. In it, I'm answering the 10 questions I hear most when writers feel stuck. How do I stop second-guessing everything? How much backstory do I actually need? What do I do when my draft is a mess? You'll get honest answers and practical next steps for each question. That's nancypanuccio.com/guide. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Confidence is not a prerequisite. It's not something you have to build up before you're allowed to move forward. Confidence is what you get from crossing barriers you thought were insurmountable, that felt insurmountable. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has the story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and book coach. Each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now, let's begin. I was listening to the podcaster Stephen Bartlett, and he talked about an experiment. Researchers drew a circle in ballpoint pen on a piece of paper and placed an ant inside the circle, just ink on paper. Now, the ant approached the line and then retreated over and over. It came to that line, that barrier, and turned back. It paced along that circle and it was trapped and gave up, even though there was nothing really actually stopping it. It was all perceived. The line was just ink. Now, the ant could have walked right over it at any moment, but the ant accepted the line as the limit of how far it could go. It internalized the barrier. It stopped even trying to cross. Then they tried the same thing with a spider. Same circle, same ink barrier. The spider hesitated at first, just like the ant, but then it did something different. It questioned the barrier. It tested the line and discovered it wasn't a physical barrier, and it walked right across it. So the ant accepted the limitation. The spider questioned it. The spider didn't accept the limitation. It quickly realized the line wasn't real. Here's where I'm going with this. Writers often accept these perceived barriers all the time. Lines that feel absolutely real, but are actually barriers you can cross. And just like that ant, once you accept these barriers as truth, you stop questioning them. You pace along them, convinced this is how far you can go. You feel trapped. You feel frustrated, discouraged. And this is where many writers give up. So today, I'm going to show you 5 perceived barriers writers accept without questioning, but really they're all just ink lines, and they only have power because you've accepted them as true. More importantly, I'm going to show you how to question these barriers and walk right across them. So let's get right to it. Barrier number 1, the outlining trap. You sit down to write and immediately think, I cannot write the scene. I can't write the first chapter because I don't know where the story is going. So you need an outline. You need to know the ending. You need to know what happens in chapter 15 before you can write chapter 3. So instead of writing, you just outline over and over. You work that outline for months, or you research different outlining methods. You try Save the Cat. You try the 3-act structure, the 7-act structure, the 5-act structure. You try beat sheets. So you're creating the map before you take the journey. Months go by, you have elaborate outlines, maybe color-coded spreadsheets, character profiles, but you don't have a first draft. So why does this feel insurmountable? Because writing without knowing where you're going feels terrifying. How can you write a scene if you don't know its purpose? How can you develop a character if you don't know their arc? You need certainty before you can create. This barrier feels real because you genuinely don't know what happens next, and the path forward is very unclear. So what you've accepted is, I can't write without knowing where this is going. So the way through that is to understand that outlining is a tool. It is not a prerequisite. Now, some writers do thrive with outlines. They work best with a roadmap. If that's you, great. I want you to outline. But here's the key. Don't get stuck there. If you've been outlining for months and haven't drafted yet, you're using the outline as a barrier. You're trying to achieve perfect certainty before you're willing to risk creating. The problem isn't outlining. The problem is endless outlining that never leads to writing. And here's what every outliner discovers. The outline changes the moment you start writing because the character does something unexpected, because a scene reveals information you didn't have before, because the story shows you what it needs to be. So the spider move here isn't to never outline. That's not what I'm saying. It's to recognize when outlining has become a barrier instead of a tool. If you need an outline, create one, but make it a living, working document, not a perfect document. Outline enough to get started, then start writing. Let the outline evolve as you write. And if you're someone who doesn't outline, outlines just don't work for you, you can write with a rough sense of direction and discover the story as you go, and then periodically do a narrative outline of what you have. That's always a good idea, to take stock of what's actually on the page. Either way, the barrier isn't whether you have an outline. The barrier is accepting, I need complete certainty before I can begin writing, and using outlining as an endless preparation that never leads to creation. Don't let outlining become the thing that keeps you from writing. At some point, you have to cross the line and draft, even if the outline isn't perfect, even if you don't know every beat, even if uncertainty remains. The outline is meant to help you write, not something you perfect before you write. Okay, barrier number 2. You're stuck in the middle or stuck somewhere in the mess of your draft. So you're writing along, you're making progress, you're feeling good about it, and then suddenly you hit this wall. You don't know what happens next or where to take the story next, or you've written yourself into a plot hole you can't solve. So you stare at your computer screen, you reread what you've written, nothing comes. You're stuck, genuinely stuck. So you stop writing, you get frustrated, you start to think you're no good at this. What made you think you could write this story? And then you give up. The block feels insurmountable. Why? Because the problem is real. You genuinely don't know what your character should do next. The plot hole is actually there. It's not your imagination. This barrier feels insurmountable because you're in the middle of creating something and it feels broken. And how can you keep building when the foundation has a crack? Here's where most writers get it wrong. They think being stuck means they need to figure everything out before writing another word. But being stuck isn't a stop sign. It's diagnostic information. Your story is telling you something. When you're stuck, you don't need to solve the problem before continuing. You just need to ask better questions that help you move forward with purpose. Questions like, what does my character want right now in this specific moment? Not in the whole story, right now, in this scene. Get specific. If you can't answer this, you don't know your character well enough yet, and that's okay. Write them figuring out what they want. Another question, what are the stakes if my character doesn't get it? If your character wants something, but there's no consequence to not getting it, you don't have conflict. You have a character taking a pleasant stroll. So you want to raise the stakes. Another question, what's the worst thing that could happen right now? When you're stuck, it often means you're playing it safe. You're protecting your character from difficulty. The worst thing is usually the most interesting thing. So write toward that. Another question, what choice does my character need to make right now? Stuck usually means your character is passive. They're waiting for something to happen instead of making something happen. So give them a hard choice between two difficult options. And another question you can ask is, what is my character avoiding? Characters avoid things they don't want to face. If your story has stalled, your character might be avoiding the real conflict. Make them face it head on. So these questions help you move forward with purpose, even when you don't have the whole map. You're not writing randomly into the fog. You're testing the barrier. You're investigating what your story needs and drafting forward with intention. So the barrier isn't that you're stuck. The barrier is that you've accepted stuck means stop, when actually stuck means just ask better questions and draft forward with purpose and intention rather than just wandering wildly through your story and throwing more ideas at it. Okay, barrier number 3, the perfection loop. So you've written chapter 1, you read it over and see problems, so you revise it. You read it again, it's better, but still not quite right, so you revise it again. You've now revised chapter 1, let's say 8 times, maybe 12. It's pretty good, maybe even great, but you can't move to chapter 2 yet because chapter 1 isn't perfect. And how can you build the rest of the story on a shaky foundation? So months pass, chapter 1 gets more polished, the rest of your story remains unwritten. Why does this feel unsurmountable? Because the problems in chapter 1 are real. The opening isn't as strong as it could be. The character's voice isn't quite there yet. The setup feels clunky, and the logic seems sound. You need to get this right before moving forward. This barrier feels responsible, professional even. You're not rushing, you're doing it right. But what you've accepted is, I can't move forward until this is perfect. So here's what you need to understand. Chapter 1 will change after you write chapter 20. It will change once you've crafted your ending. You can't know what your opening needs to be until you know what your story is. And you can't know what your story is until you write it, even if you have an outline. I've seen this pattern dozens of times with my coaching clients. A writer spends months perfecting their opening chapters. Finally, they move forward. They get to chapter 15 and realize their protagonist's real motivation isn't what they thought, or they discover the story is actually about the relationship with the sister, not the romance, or they find the perfect opening scene in chapter 8. So suddenly all that work on chapter 1 has to be redone anyway because the story revealed itself differently than expected. So the spider move here is to draft forward with imperfection and trust that the story will become clearer as you keep writing, as you keep probing your material. So write chapter 1 well enough to get moving, get it good enough for now, and keep going. You can always revise backward, but you can't revise what doesn't exist. So let it be imperfect. Let chapter 1 be imperfect because you need to see the whole shape of your story before you can really know how to open it. The opening you think you need now might not be the opening your completed story actually needs. Perfection is not the foundation. Completion is the foundation. You need a whole draft. Messy, imperfect, but complete before you can truly revise anything. So the barrier isn't that chapter 1 isn't perfect or that you don't have it right. The barrier is that you've accepted, I must perfect this before moving on to chapter 2 and chapter 3 and so on, when actually you need to complete before you can perfect. Done is better than perfect because without done, there is no perfect. Again, I don't want you writing aimlessly, just freely, but with intention and a strong sense of what story you're telling. Often writers are throwing too much into the pot and the story goes off the rails, and this is where you get overwhelmed and confused. It gets harder to structure, and this is where book coaching or manuscript evaluations have tremendous value because they make writing and revising super efficient, super clear. Okay, on to barrier number 4, the comparison barrier. You spend 20 minutes scrolling through a Facebook group, or you check your favorite author's Instagram, or you just see other writers announcing book deals, or they have their first book published, they say. Maybe they have agents, they're sharing their cover reveals, they're posting about their writing routines, how they wrote 3,000 words today while you struggled to write 300 words. You close the app feeling deflated. Everyone else is so much further ahead. They're more talented, you think. They're more disciplined, you think. They're more successful, you think. So you're falling behind. Maybe you'll never catch up. So instead of writing, you scroll more. You're trying to figure out what they're doing that you're not. You're looking for the secret, the method, the answer, but mostly you're reinforcing this belief that you're not enough. So why does this feel insurmountable? Because the evidence is real. Other writers are getting deals. They are finishing their books. They are ahead of you in measurable ways. So this barrier feels insurmountable because it's not just your insecurity talking. You can see the proof. Writer A got an agent after 2 queries. Writer B just signed a 3-book deal. Writer C finished their draft in 6 months. And you're still struggling with chapter 8. The comparison makes your own progress feel insignificant and even impossible. So what you're believing, what you're telling yourself is, I can't succeed because I'm too far behind everyone else. I must be not that talented. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. But here's what you need to understand. You're comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. You see the announcement of a book deal. You see the announcement of, I just finished my first book. I just published my first book. You don't see the 7 years they spent learning craft, or the 3 manuscripts they shelved, or the 147 rejections before they found their agent. You see them posting about their 3,000 word day. You don't see the week before when they wrote nothing, or they felt like they had nothing to say. You don't see the 10,000 words they'll cut in revision. You see their success, but you don't see their struggle. And here's the bigger truth. Their timeline is not your timeline, so don't compare. Some writers get agents with their first manuscript. Some writers get agents with their 5th. Some writers publish at 25. Some publish at 55 years. There's no should about pace. The only question that matters is, are you making progress on your story? If comparing makes you feel motivated and inspired, great, keep doing it. But if it makes you feel inadequate and paralyzed, if it makes you avoid writing rather than embrace it, then it's not helping you. It's become a barrier you keep reinforcing. So the spider move here is to ruthlessly protect your creative energy. If comparison is draining you, stop comparing. Step away. Run your own race. Protect your ability to do the work. Your progress is enough. Your pace is enough. The story you're writing, the only one you can write, is enough. The barrier isn't that other writers are ahead. The barrier is that you've accepted being behind means I can't succeed, when actually success is not a race. It's a practice. Okay, last one, barrier number 5, the rejection barrier. So you've spent months, maybe years, writing and revising your manuscript. You researched agents, crafted your query letter, and sent it out to 5 or 10 agents. Maybe you self-published, but no one is buying. But then the rejections start coming, or worse, silence, radio silence from agents who never respond, readers who don't buy. After 1 or 2 rejections or weeks of hearing nothing, you think, see, I knew it. This isn't working. The story isn't good enough. I'm not good enough. I should stop wasting everyone's time, including my own. So you pull back. You stop querying. You lose confidence. Maybe you shelve the manuscript entirely. You've accepted the line. Rejection means this is as far as you can go. Now, of course, this feels insurmountable because rejection is real. A lack of sales hurts. Silence feels like an answer, and not a good one. You put your work out there, you made yourself vulnerable, and got nothing back. Or you got a form rejection that tells you absolutely nothing about what went wrong. This barrier feels especially real because you have concrete evidence. This isn't just fear or insecurity talking. You actually put yourself out there. You actually queried. You actually got rejected, or you self-published and you're not getting the sales you hoped you'd get. But what you've told yourself, what you've accepted is, I got rejected, or I heard nothing. This proves my manuscript isn't good enough. I should just give up the writing gig altogether. But here's what most writers don't realize. Rejection is data, not a verdict. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance was rejected 161 times before publication. The Help was rejected over 60 times. A Wrinkle in Time, 26 rejections. These aren't just feel-good stories about persistence. They're proof that rejection doesn't mean you can't cross this line. It means something else entirely. When you get rejected after querying 1 to 2 agents, you haven't failed. Or if you're not getting sales on your self-published romantasy novel on Amazon, that doesn't mean you failed. You've barely begun testing the line. You're like the ant that touches the ink once, feels resistance, and immediately accepts, I can't cross. The spider tests the line multiple times from different angles and gathers information. So what is rejection actually telling you? Well, it could mean several things. Possibility number 1, your story needs more work to be publishable. Maybe the opening isn't hooking readers. Maybe the middle is flabby or falling apart. Maybe your protagonist's arc is not clear. Maybe the stakes aren't high enough. This isn't failure. This is diagnostic information. If you're getting form rejections with no feedback, this is when you need outside perspective. Not from your mother or from friends who will tell you it's great, from a beta reader who knows your genre, or a developmental editor, or a writing coach who can help you see what needs to be changed or improved. Possibility number 2, maybe you're querying the wrong agents. Sometimes the line you're hitting isn't about your manuscript at all. It's about fit. You can have a great thriller and query agents who only represent literary fiction. That's not rejection of your work. It's just misalignment. Possibility number 3, your query letter isn't working. Maybe your manuscript is strong, but your query letter isn't capturing what makes your story compelling. Maybe your hook is buried in the 3rd paragraph instead of leading. Query letters are a separate craft skill. It's marketing. If your manuscript is solid, but your query isn't landing, that's fixable. Possibility number 4, you haven't queried enough agents. If you've only queried 5 to 10 agents, you haven't tested the line yet. Querying is a numbers game. 1 to 2 rejections isn't data. It's barely a sample size. Or if you self-publish, maybe you need better messaging around marketing your book. So the spider move here is to treat rejection as diagnostic information, not as a verdict. So after your first round of rejections, ask yourself, do I need outside feedback on my manuscript? Am I querying the right agents for my genre? Does my query letter effectively sell my story? Have I queried enough agents to actually test the market? Do I need to better market my self-published book? Then take action based on what you discover. Maybe that means revising. Maybe it means rewriting your query. Maybe it means researching 50 more agents who are a better fit. Maybe it means hiring a professional to give you honest feedback. You can't know if your manuscript is publishable after 1 to 2 rejections. You haven't tested the line. You've barely touched it. The line feels real because rejection hurts. But I got rejected, therefore I should give up is a barrier you're creating. You've accepted it too early. There is a way through. It might mean revising. It might mean querying 50 more agents. It might mean getting professional feedback. But there is a path forward if you're willing to question what you've accepted and investigate what the rejection is actually telling you. So, in closing, all 5 of these barriers feel insurmountable. They feel as real and physical as that ballpoint circle around the ant. They feel like concrete walls you cannot cross, but they're not. The uncertainty about where your story is going feels real. Being stuck feels real. The imperfection in chapter 1 feels real. Others writers' success feels real. Rejection feels real. But you've accepted these feelings as barriers when they're not. They're actually opportunities. So the ant sees the line, feels it's real, and accepts, I can't cross. The spider sees the same line, tests it, and discovers, oh, I can cross to the other side. Every writer faces these barriers. Published writers, successful writers, first-time writers, writers you admire. The difference isn't that they don't hit the walls, it's that they don't accept the walls as final. They question, they test, they investigate, they recalibrate, and they find the path forward. And here's what I want to leave you with. You don't need confidence before you cross those barriers. Confidence is not a prerequisite. It's not something you have to build up before you're allowed to move forward. Confidence is what you get from crossing barriers you thought were insurmountable, that felt insurmountable. You gain confidence by writing beyond your outline and discovering the story works. You gain confidence by drafting forward when you're stuck and finding the answer. You gain confidence by querying 20 agents after the first 5 rejected you. You gain confidence by crossing the line that felt like a barrier and discovering it wasn't, that you surpassed it. So don't wait to feel confident. Cross the barrier first. The confidence comes after. Because here's the truth. These barriers feel real, but they're not. There is a way to the other side, and every writer who's crossed these barriers started exactly where you are, feeling stuck, feeling uncertain, feeling like giving up. They didn't feel confident before they crossed the barrier. They felt scared. They crossed anyway. And that's where the confidence comes from. The ant accepted the line as the limit of how far it could go. The spider tested the line and walked free. So you get to choose which one you want to be. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And if you're listening on Apple, please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.